Hey, it's Mark Ferguson with Invest for More, and the sheriff's deputies are here because we are doing an eviction today on this rental property. Now, this did not go well, and we'll show you what happened once we got inside, but this is not my property. So, a lot of people talk about how we have so many tenant problems and evictions and issues. We really don't, considering we've got over 40 properties and around 90 units, I think. If you count our commercial, residential, multifamily units. Now, this property is owned by the heirs of an investor. My father used to work with a bunch, and Justin in my office worked with a bunch. And unfortunately, he passed away. And the heirs are trying to figure out what to do with it. And it was not a very good situation. So I was trying to help out, trying to point them in the right directions. But there are a few things that probably could have been done better to avoid some of the issues that property has. Now, going back to my properties, this is the Ocho, and we had a number of evictions and issues here, but this was the last eviction I've actually had, knock on wood, many, many times, and it was a garage eviction. Back in March of 2023, we rented these two-car garages out separately, and we had a tenant who wasn't paying, who was constantly having problems. There was a police standoff outside of his unit because of a friend who had gone over there. He even, I think, made a pee hole in his garage, which we show during the eviction process. That was a fairly easy, simple one. Before that, we had a couple of evictions at the Ocho Apartments. We had the squatters in December of 2022. That was a crazy one where the judge let them stay because they had nowhere else to go. And ironically, I talked about a property last week where we found someone staying in the back of the property. They'd built themselves a little house, and their story was their girlfriend or wife had been cheating on them with them in the house, and just crazy story. Well, the squatters told me that exact same story here when I first met them, and I think that story just goes around to gain sympathy and shock and awe. But anyway, the squatters eviction was pretty crazy. One of the worst evictions we ever had was in November of 22 at this property, and that was a lady and her family. Just the place was trashed. They were just yelling, screaming at us the whole time. It was police had to be called multiple times. So there were a few issues here, and this is a property I bought in 21 or 22, and those were inherited tenants. We've had much fewer problems since then. Things have gone pretty smooth. And that's the case in most of our properties. We do have a lot of drama, sometimes some evictions in new properties we buy when we take over tenants. And that thankfully didn't happen at the train depot apartments where we've been working on those. We've had our fair share of drama there, but not related to tenants or having to do evictions. And since this, we have replaced those garage doors too with metal doors and put openers on them to help with security. So that second door from the left was the evicted unit. Someone had tried to break in. There were all kinds of issues there. He had cameras up and different things. There are always cars parked right in front of it and then in front of other garages too, causing problems. Just a whole lot of issues. And on top of that, he stopped paying. So we tried to work with him. We tried to figure out some way to get him to move out and leave, and he just would not do it. So we try to avoid evictions. That's one reason we haven't had very many evictions lately. We have posted a number of eviction notices. We have threatened to do evictions. And hopefully that gets the process rolling of people either catching up with rent or leaving on their own, not having to go through the full eviction where the sheriff's deputies show up and you rekey it and the whole route there. So we did have one unit at the complex where we thought we were going to have to do an eviction, where a tenant didn't pay 1 month and just refused to pay and just, assumed that month they would get for free and wouldn't work with us, wouldn't set up a payment plan, wouldn't talk to us about it. And we had to go through the mediation. The tenant didn't show up to mediation, claimed they had the dates wrong, ended up going to a hearing, and the judge agreed to postpone the eviction if the tenant caught up, which we reluctantly agreed to as well, and the tenant is still there paying. So anyway, we have since had very few issues. Random dogs walking through. And since this eviction happened, and here you can see what the garage looked like, When we opened it up for the first time after being told by the sheriff we had possession and could do that. They may or may not have been living in here too a little bit, because I think they put up that insulation, and they had heat in there, a fridge in there. They had like some tarps and like a miniature little living room here. The roof was always kind of melted with snow because you could see there was heat in this unit. All the other units just are kind of open to the roof because they're just for storage and not for living in. There's the pee hole right there. It went to the outside in case it's too cold outside and you want to avoid, using the bathroom. What happens if they are going number 2 was my question. Anyway, so that was that eviction. Here's what happened at the current eviction. Now, I showed up at the eviction just a tiny bit late. The police already went in and they cleared it. There was nobody home. So Justin in my office, who's worked with me 12 years now or something crazy, went to college with him and met him there, was working with this investor's brother. And this tenant had been here 13 years and rented this place that whole time. The heir wanted to sell the property. The best way to do that is to get it vacant, and they'd given the tenant notice of moving out. Their lease wasn't being renewed, and the tenant just would not move. And they tried to work out something mutually, and just from what I understand, the tenant was not cooperating, not helping at all. So unfortunately, they had to do an eviction. And from all they knew, the tenant was still here, still living here, but it was freezing in this house. And that's one of the mistakes here that may or may not have been able to have been avoided. The thing is, when we do an eviction, we are going by that property almost every day to see if they're still there. And if we don't see cars or don't see like signs of people living there, we'll post something on the door, kind of tape it on the crease there, or put something there so that we can see if someone's going in and out. And if they're not there, we want to try and get in there right away to avoid this. It was 32 degrees inside. And this may have been done on purpose as well. So that thermostat worked, but the power was off to the house. So the furnace couldn't turn on. None of the electrical was working. And we were trying to figure that out. This works because it has battery backup. But then we'll show you something else here in a second that we found. So, but it's possible this tenant had moved out a little while ago. It's possible they moved out yesterday too, because it is 8 degrees outside. And unfortunately, I was like, oh, it is so cold in here. I really hope that this isn't the case, but that was hard to turn. And there's ice in the toilet. So there's ice in the toilet. There's ice in the toilet bowl. So yeah, that's not good. Now, hopefully, it's just a little bit frozen. The pipes aren't frozen. None of them broke. But then I walk into this room, and we've had this happen with tenants before, too. Window wide open. Not just a little bit open, wide open. So it is possible if they moved out, yesterday and left that window wide open, it could have gotten that cold in the house. In a few hours even, with that window open like that. So, like I said, you could check on the house. You try and make sure they haven't moved out. Then you can avoid the eviction too. But there's no guarantees that would have helped here if they just recently moved out and left that window open. Not sure what the situation is. So with the eviction, so you've got to have 10 guys in Colorado show up, or women, doesn't have to be guys. And then you got to have enough to empty the house in an hour is what they want. And it doesn't matter how full it is, how much stuff. That's the rules. That's the guidelines. Now, they'll give you some leeway if you've got 10 guys there and you're working hard. We've had that happen at properties where we had to be there a couple of hours just moving stuff nonstop. And looks like he spilled some oil or grease. Hey, at least he put cat litter down. But they'll give you some leeway, but they want you to make an effort. Now, if you show up with 3 guys and the house is full of stuff, they will just cancel the eviction and say, oh, come back when you've got more people. So you don't want that to happen. You want to make sure you're prepared and have everybody there. This house luckily did not have too much stuff there, and you don't have to move the stuff outside. You just have to move the stuff from the inside to the outside. And what we'll normally do is have a dumpster, roll-off dumpster, put all the stuff in there. You have to leave it outside for 24 hours. Once your 24 hours is up, then you can remove the stuff. Now, I checked downstairs, and it was definitely warmer down here because the window wasn't open down here. And that part had not frozen. So that's good news, but the water's still on, right? So that's something you want to be very careful with on a house, is if you know the pipes are frozen, there's a good chance they aren't going to leak when they're frozen. But when they thaw out, they could leak and spray water everywhere. So I was telling Justin, hey, make sure the main water is shut off before you get the heat turned back on. Make sure, you should have a plumber here in the house with you. There's a few things you can do to take some precautions to make sure you don't have a disaster, because like in Texas a few years ago, people weren't used to the crazy frozen weather. Their pipes froze, they got their properties heated back up, and then boom, they flooded everything and had an even bigger mess. Now, speaking of properties where tenants left windows open, we had one we sold 5 years ago or so, and we bought as a flip, had a tenant there. They moved out, didn't tell us, left the windows open, turned off the heat, and we had frozen pipes there, which caused quite a bit of damage. So, unfortunately, that just raises costs and prices for everybody when things like that happen. So I was trying to figure out why there's no power, to see if they turned off the breakers or something. But everything seemed to be on. I don't know if there was a main power switch somewhere too that had been turned off, but everything there seemed to be okay. And then here's kind of the backyard. They had some interesting stuff back there. That was a window that was left open up there. And then there's also the meter out here. I wanted to check and see if that meter was running or working and see what's going on here. Now, Justin had also talked to the property owner, and he said Excel he thought was on. That's the power company. He thought everything was good. He didn't know, he thought maybe breakers were off too. So that's also a little tricky when you've got so many moving parts. Like when I'm the owner in here and doing everything, it makes it easier. I know what's going on. But when you've got a different owner, a different agent, someone else who helps with evictions, the more moving parts you have, sometimes the more things that can be missed. So if you saw that meter, it said error on it. So I don't know what was going on with the power there. So power was definitely off. Breakers seemed to be on, but the meter said error. So I don't know if it was an Excel problem or something else happened. But that's up to Justin and the owner to figure that out. And I have not heard yet what was going on. So this is back to the Ocho. This is after the squatter eviction. And I mentioned putting stuff in dumpsters, and that may seem harsh, but it actually helps in a lot of situations. So in this situation, we did not have a dumpster there. I can't remember why, if we didn't get it or for some reason we decided not to. But we piled everything outside on the lawn, waited 24 hours, and what happens is after those 24 hours are up, you come back and stuff is everywhere. It's scattered everywhere. There's trash everywhere. It's a giant mess. So here's what it looked like, later on. And then you got to move stuff twice. So it actually works a little better to keep stuff in dumpsters. And honestly, people are probably less likely to come take the stuff if it's in a dumpster than if it's just laying in the yard like this. So it actually probably helps the tenants out too if they ever wanted to come back and get some of their stuff. So you can see the giant mess it makes if you don't use a dumpster. And that was one thing Justin didn't realize. He had the dumpster there, and they started putting stuff in the yard. I'm like, no. Put it in the dumpster. Put it in there nicely. Stack it up, and hopefully, that makes things a little easier. Now, in another situation, back a long time ago, my sister was a property manager for many years. She managed an eviction and actually got sued because a tenant said they broke stuff while moving it out of the house, and then their daughter got cut. It was, I believe, a completely made-up story, but they went to court and everything. The court sided with my sister. She was cleared everything but had to pay for attorney's fees and quite a bit of money, unfortunately. So you also want to make sure you're not trashing their stuff. You're not like smashing TVs, leaving broken glass out, doing anything that they can come back and say, oh, you broke all our stuff, or you caused damage, or someone got hurt here, anything like that. All right. So that was the day. Like I said, not quite as crazy or as much stuff going on as with some of our evictions. But hopefully that property owner doesn't have a bunch of frozen pipes. Maybe it's just a little bit of frozen water and everything's still good. Like I said, hopefully they kind of followed my advice. and don't turn the heat back on without having a plumber there, or at least the water turned off, but preferably both, so you don't cause more damage. And then obviously they need to get that house cleaned up a little bit, and then they'll end up putting it on the market and get it sold. So one last thing I want to talk about is I feel like a lot of people feel when tenants move into houses and they rent them that they should just get those houses forever. But unfortunately, as a tenant, if you're renting a property, I mean, that is a temporary agreement. Usually a year or two is how long you are renting that property for. And that entitles you to a year or 2 years of residency, nothing more. And if the owner wants to sell or move in or do something with that property, they have the right to tell you to leave, to not renew the lease. So that's something you have to think about as a tenant. If you really want a long-term place, don't want to have to move, you've got to figure out how to buy a property. So tenancy is not made to be permanent forever, and you may have to move out if something happens to the owner, if they make a change of plans, even if they just don't want to rent it anymore. That is their property, and in my opinion, that should be their right. Now, that was, I think, the other eviction pile we had from the other unit right before. They had even more stuff. So again, we would have been better off putting this all in dumpsters. And we usually do. I just don't know why we didn't that time. We got a dumpster the next day, got everything thrown away, put in there. But it takes a little more effort to move it out into the yard, then wait, then later on clean it all up, put it in the dumpster, instead of just putting it all in there first. All right, that was what happened today. Could have been much worse. Could have been packed full of stuff. The house could have been completely trashed. Still, not good having it so cold in there. And hopefully they figured it out and there was minimal damage. All right, we'll be back with more of our real estate videos. Like I said in my liquor store video yesterday, I am buying a new liquor store next week. That's exciting. I'm buying a commercial property, a big 10,000 square foot commercial property tomorrow. So that's pretty exciting. We've got another house flip under contract to buy. We'll be closing on in a couple of weeks. I thought I had 2 under contract to buy. The other one we had under contract, we're ready to go, and it turns out they had some title issues as a foreclosure, and they said they're pulling off the market. They'll have to wait 3 to 5 months to figure it out, but then they would let us know. So we'll see what happens there. That would have been a really interesting one too, because we might have had to do an eviction there. But not anymore. All right, thanks for watching. Let us know what you think. We'll be back with a lot more coming up here soon.